Welcome back. I've lost track of what part we're on. I think this might be part 7 now. We're going to get our auth potentially wrapped up in this video, but we'll see how it goes. First thing we want to do is deal with the fact that when I log out, I want to essentially protect the app for the user to not be able to see the content. Obviously, that might not be the case in everyone's app. You might have like a guest mode essentially and allow the content to be shown. But for our purposes, we are requiring everything behind an authentication. So what we're going to do is deal with that from the router's perspective, where the router will actually have a guard to be like, hey, if you're not logged in, we're going to redirect you back to the login screen. Now, to do that, there's actually one step we want to do ahead of that is going to help us with a bunch of things, and that's called creating a Cubit. So we're going to go to our core, and we're going to make a new folder called Cubits. Now, Cubits are kind of like a simplified version of a block, where this is much more like if you use Serverpod. In my opinion, this is a lot like a notifier, where you kind of have like a class that represents a certain amount of state, and it's you kind of work with it in a really simple way without events and stuff like that. So you're not pushing events into Cubit, you're essentially just updating its state ongoingly as needed. So let's go here and let's go new Cubit. And we're going to call this, I think I'm going to call app user, because it's kind of like the, it's not the user model, it's really like the app. It's the user that's signed into the app, and it's going to represent that. And sometimes it's going to be null. There might not be a user logged in. So let's try to call it, let's try that. Although I might have, no, it worked. Yeah, I was smart enough to make it Pascal case. Everything's good. Okay, so we'll have our app user Cubit here. So let's figure out how this will work. We'll start with the state, and we'll just make sure. So we're going to have our app user state, and we're going to have app user initial, meaning they're not necessarily logged in. But we're also going to have a state called app user logged in. And when we have an app user logged in, we're actually going to have our user model right here. And of course, we need to then construct that to pass it in. And we will just do this .user. So this is just one parameter. Just keep it simple. Okay, so that's kind of the state that we're going to allow. Now in the Cubit itself, which is going to be using that state, you'll see we are app user Cubit, extending Cubit, app user state. And in our constructor, we just have to set in the super what the initial state is, which is going to be obviously initial. Then let's actually make a function that we can call. So this is not a private function. This is actually something we can call outside of this class, and we'll call update user, and we'll allow a user to be passed in, but it can be null. That way we can use this also kind of for logging out. And we can go if user equals null, then we're just going to emit. So this is, if you use Serverpod, this would be similar to going state equals and then setting a new state, but we're just going to omit the app user initial because they don't exist anymore. We're updating it to do that. Otherwise, we're going to emit app user logged in, and we're going to use user right here. So that's nice, and let's just make a helper function called logout. This isn't necessarily required because we could always just call update user and pass null in, but this will just be a simple way, and we can actually do this one of two ways. We could just emit the state, or I can actually go just do update user since we already have that code and pass null in. And I'm going to do it that way just in case we ever want to do something in here like log or something. We don't have to remember to do it in two places. It's going to essentially call this. Okay, so now we actually have a Cubit. So let's go to our main.dart because we still need this Cubit to be registered in our multi-block provider. So to do that, as I'm sure you could guess, we'll do this one first. So I'm just going to copy one of these simple ones here, block provider, and we're going to use app user Cubit. Now, of course, this won't work yet because we need to register this in our dependencies as well. So let's go to our dependencies, and let's essentially get that in there too. And I'm going to do that. It's not really part of auth in my opinion. It is kind of more global than that, and that's why we put it in the common or in the core thing. So we're actually going to register a singleton here, service locator. I'm doing it right at the top. Register lazy singleton. Service locator.register. I don't know why. We'll just copy this then. And we want to register our app user Cubit. And in here, the way to register it, we just go like this, and we just return it, app user Cubit. Nothing passed in, we're good. So we'll save that. So that's good. Then let's do this, and let's refresh. Not going to do anything yet, but it exists. Now, what we also want to do is be able to, in our block, work with this Cubit. So let's go within our block, and we're going to require, and I'll do this as the very first parameter, app user Cubit, and we'll just call it user, actually let's call it app user Cubit, and we'll pass it in there, and we're going to require that to be passed in too, required this dot app user Cubit. Okay, great. So now back in our dependencies, of course, you can imagine we're going to have an error down here because it's expecting this to be passed in. So let's do app user Cubit, and we can do service locator app user Cubit, just like that. And now we're passed in and everything's good. Okay, so now what we want to do really is when the user logs in, so we have this emit here, I'm going to turn this instead of an arrow function, let's actually essentially do it like this. And what we can actually do when the auth success happens is also take our app user Cubit dot user and pass in that user. So then we'll actually be updating our Cubit, which is nice when this happens, and then still doing the normal emit. Similarly, when we log out, I will also turn this into this way of doing things. And we can go this, and we can go, instead of passing null in, let's actually use that logout function we made. Okay, great. So let's just play with how this could work. So I'm going to log in first of all. That just got me thinking. We also need to emit this event, this update user event on our. Oh, actually, we did it in the right place. This is where I want it, but we also need this in our right here, which now I'm starting to see like, okay, there's a bit of duplication here. So what we can actually do, because we kind of have multiple times auth can essentially be a success. So let's actually just make a void private function called emit auth success. And within here, a user is going to be passed in and an emitter of type auth state. And we'll just call it emit. And then right inside here, we can actually take our this guy right here and this right here, do basically both of these things whenever we call this. Meaning now I can go here and essentially just turn this back to this method and pass in the user and emit, which is the second parameter of this. However, because this is already conforming, if you see this, it's already conforming to the right shape, we can just pass a reference to this function because we set it up in exactly the right way. So let's do that there. And also when on login instead, we'll just go like this and do the same thing. So now whenever you log in or this thing is checked and it becomes, there is a user logged in, we're just going to emit this auth success, which will essentially update the user in our Cubit and emit the success state. So now let's just rebuild, and we will get redirected back. Okay, and I think the reason is I might have misspoken. I think we do actually still have to call this, passing in user and then passing in the emit that comes from here. So we're passing that emit through. So let me just actually replace that. We have, just one other reference to it. So let's do that. And let's rebuild and hope for the best. So, okay, we got logged in, which is great. So let's actually go to our movie list page. And I'm just going to clean this up a bit while we're here. And let us, right before the movie list widget, I'm going to wrap this in a column. And this is just kind of temporary right now. And on top of it, well, let's actually wrap this in an expanded, because now we're in a column. And here, let's just put some text that says test 1, 2, 3, just to make sure stuff's working. And it is complaining, but that will change in a moment. I think we can make this one a const though. So there we have our test 1, 2, 3. So here, let's just see how we can work with the Cubit. So I'm going to wrap this test 1, 2, 3 in a just a block builder, because I don't really care about the listening in this case right now. And this will be app user Cubit and app user state. Then we have our state accessing to that, and we can do something. We can actually just do a switch statement here, which is a cool way of doing it. We can switch on state, assuming you're using Dart 3, a certain version of 3, but you should be, like, use the latest, why not? In the case that it is app user state, let me remember actually what this was called, app user initial, which in theory won't ever be the case when we're here because you can't get here, but let's just return text saying no user. And in the case that it's app user logged in, we can actually go and return, maybe text that takes the state.user.username, or username is fine. And this could be a const. Whatever. So, it works very much, it's still a block builder, like Cubit is still a block. It's just a more simplified and kind of dealing with all the boilerplate under the hood for specific cases. So you'll see now it actually says test123 because I'm logged in. Now let's just test if this will work. So if I log out, that goes to no user because the Cubit was actually updated to say no user. So that's all good. However, let's make this a little bit better because it doesn't really make sense to have like the user here. We're actually going to create a sort of like a drop-down menu here that will allow us to log out, but also kind of show, the username in it. So let's do that right now. So to do this, I'm going to make actually a whole nother feature now called user, which is going to, it's not really related to auth because it's not about logging in and logging out and all that kind of stuff. It's something to do with, the current logged in user. And in fact, we'll probably move our Cubit here once we have this. And now that I think about it, let's actually call it app user, just so that everything makes sense. And in here, we're going to make a new folder called presentation. And in here, we're going to make a new folder just called widgets for now. And in the widget folder, we're going to make a new file, and we're going to call it, let's call it app user dropdown.dart. Okay, so we'll just make a stateless widget for this. And stateless, I have so many plugins here for all my different things. Stateless widget called app user dropdown. And within here, I want to return a pop-up button, pop-up menu button. And then, our item builder, this is going to have context, and we're basically going to return a couple options here. But let's wrap this whole thing in a block builder again and kind of do what we essentially just did over here. So I'll actually just copy this right here just to make life a little bit easier. And we'll import, obviously, the things we need, block builder, import without actually trying to construct it. There we go. And then in here, let us, first of all, before we actually return this, let's see if, state, and we can go is not, which is kind of a weird, doesn't seem very normal in Dart, but we can do is not here. We can go app user logged in. So if it's not logged in, just in case we have other states, let's just do that. And we're just going to return a size box here because we don't really want to show this if the user's not logged in. Maybe in a real app, this would actually be replaced with a login button or something like that. But this is fine for our purposes. Then otherwise, we know that it is that state, and we can actually do some stuff here. So maybe the first entry in it is a pop-up menu entry, I think it's called. Yeah. And we'll just do a child. Oh, okay, maybe it's not. Sorry, it's not entry. It's item. Item extends entry. Child. And here we want to do text, and we can use state.user because we know Dart and VS Code and everything knows that this is actually the correct kind of state right now that has the user on it, and we can go username. There we go. So we'll have that as maybe the first entry in it. And then for the second entry, let's do another pop-up menu item, but instead, let's put a text. Let's put text that says, oops, text, and we'll just actually do the word log out here. Log out, and now this can actually be a const. And we want to do an on tap event, and here we'll do context.read our auth block dot logout. Dot add, and then we need to actually add the event, which is the auth logout event. There we go. So let's take this and let's go back to our movie list page. I'm going to essentially get rid of what we did here. And we're also going to get rid of all of this. So I'm going to get rid of this, and hopefully I can figure out how many things to get rid of, because this is always hard to do. I think that will probably do it. There we go. Make it a const. Add this. And then for our actions, instead of this text button, let's actually use our app user dropdown that we just made. And we can just make all this a const now. And we will save everything. And let's just refresh. And let's try logging in. And we'll see we have this nice little drop down here. And now we can actually, this doesn't do anything. We didn't put it on tap, but maybe we'll go to the user's profile in the future. But if we click log out, we get the log out and it goes away, meaning, you know, we're pretty good. Now, the last piece of this puzzle really is how do we actually redirect someone to the right place? So let's go to our router and figure that out. So something that's cool about GoRouter is it does have a redirect function we can pass as a parameter. And redirect takes, first of all, context, as most things do, followed by state. Okay, now state, in this case, isn't like our Cubit state, it's the GoRouter state. But we want to get our own state, so we're going to make something called final user state, and we can use the context to read the app user Cubit and .state. Now you'll notice I'm using read and not watch, and that's just something we have to do with GoRouter. We can't actually be watching something here. So in theory, this won't work just right out the gate because this only gets called when the redirect function gets called, which is not going to just be in a game loop like always calling, but we're going to get to that and see how can we actually like trigger this thing to rerun to then get an active value. The next thing I want to do is make a list of what we'll consider public routes. Public routes. And for now, it's really just the login page. That's the only page you're allowed to go to right here. So we'll just do login page.route. Now we will be adding like a register page eventually and so on and so forth. So that's why I'm doing it this way and not just making it a single thing. And then what we want to check is if not public routes.contains, and we'll check the state.matched location. So that's part of GoRouter state. Match location is a string, so that's why we're doing .route to get the string version of it. So if it doesn't actually match, and if the user state is app user initial, then we want to basically return a new route here. And anything we return to this redirect, you'll see it can return a future string, nullable string. If a string gets returned, it's going to redirect to that path for us. So what we want to do is return the login page.route, which is a string of that route, which essentially is this right here. Otherwise, if we get all the way to the end, we'll just return null. We're like, no need to redirect. So there we go. We have our redirector. Everything's good. Now, the problem is, how do we actually know when to call this? Well, let's open up our main.dart and let's go to our material app router. And we're actually going to wrap our material app in a block builder listener, block consumer. And I'll change that if I'm wrong. I forget if we want to do how we want to do this exactly. You know what? Yeah, listener is going to do. We don't actually want to update anything about this, the UI. We just want to do something when things happen. So we're going to have a block listener. And what we want to be listening to here, again, is the app user Cubit. And our state will be app user state. Then in the listen function, so listen, this will be called anytime something changes with this. So simply what we can do is we can actually take our router. So we have app router.router, and we can go .refresh. And refresh will essentially recall, as well as other things, I'm sure. It's going to recall the redirect function here, meaning it will be able to do this context.read and do this logic for us. So let's just save that. And let's rebuild. And let's see if all this works. So I'm going to try logging in. And then I'm going to try logging out. And you'll see I actually got brought back to the login page. The redirect worked because I wasn't logged in. Let's just refresh again, kind of like test everything. So every case, I'm not logged in. Let's log back in. Let's refresh now, just to make sure we didn't break anything. So yeah, it kept us logged in, which is what we'd expect. And now we can go log out, and we're logged out. So there you have it. I think that's a perfect time to stop this chapter. In the next one, we will be dealing with creating an account, registering an account, if you will. And that will wrap up auth for us. So we'll definitely be done auth after the next chapter, 100%. I'm not can't stick it to it any longer. Let's get auth done. We'll see you in the next one.